At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. After all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Larissa. Let's begin. Vizic's job was one of the most unusual in the galaxy. He worked for a company that specialized in delivering a controlled and safe, yet as authentic as possible, death world experience to a wide variety of beings. The only things his clients usually had in common were boring lives, deep pockets, and of course, a sense of adventure that typically ended the moment they saw their first Venomous glider. Today, Vizix was checking the integrity of the force field around hut number 4 while waiting for the family about to spend a few days on this death world. He was already rehearsing the safety rules and his polite smile when he saw them. 4 humans arriving through the entrance, a species Vizix vaguely recognized but had never interacted with before. His first instinct was comparison. The moment his eyes settled on them, his mind began cataloging similarities and differences against his own reflection, which he saw every morning in the mirror of his quarters. The similarities began reassuringly enough. They were bipedal, just as he was. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head positioned atop a neck. But then the differences began to assert themselves, and they did so rapidly. Their skin came in shades Vizix had never seen on a sentient being. The taller male's was a deep brown, rich like the wood imported from the Cesare system. The female beside him had skin several shades lighter with a warm pinkish undertone. The 2 smaller ones, clearly juveniles, fell somewhere between their parents in coloration. Their ears were wrong. Not wrong, he corrected himself, just different. Small, rounded things that pressed close to their skulls, lacking the elegant length of his own ears, which extended upward and came to fine points that could swivel slightly to catch sound. He became suddenly self-conscious of his ears, wondering if the humans found them as strange as he found their abbreviated versions. He forced himself to stop staring as the family crossed the compound grounds, their footsteps crunching on the imported gravel. The male walked slightly ahead, his gait confident despite being on an alien world. The others moved more carefully, but their eyes were just as active, scanning the environment, noting the force field shimmer, the huts, the alien vegetation visible beyond the protective barrier. The male opened his mouth to speak as they came within comfortable conversational distance. Vizix saw his throat work, heard the first syllable emerge. His implant translator stirred to life, beginning its rapid analysis of phonemes, syntax, grammatical structure. The technology was good, but it needed a few seconds to fully engage, especially with a language it had never encountered before. The first words came through garbled, incomplete, but Vizix was already speaking. Welcome, honored guests, to the most authentic death world experience in the galaxy. My name is Vizix, and I will be your guide and safety coordinator throughout your stay at our facility. Rest assured you are in the most capable hands, backed by the full resources and technological excellence of Survival Experiences Unlimited, the premier provider of controlled danger tourism across the galaxy. He realized his mistake instantly. The human male had stopped speaking, his mouth still partly open, his expression shifting from friendly greeting to mild confusion. Vizix felt heat flood through his torso, a physiological response to social error that his species shared with many others. He had interrupted. Worse, he had interrupted a client, and in his rush to appear professional, he might have missed something important. What if they had been about to tell him about a medical condition, a dietary restriction, a fear that needed accommodation? His mind spiraled through possibilities, each worse than the last. The human closed his mouth, glanced at his family, then back at Vizix. His expression soothed into something diplomatic. "Thank you for the welcome," he said. And this time, the translator caught every word, rendering them in Vizix's native language. "That's very kind. Would it be possible to get some cold water? The kids are pretty thirsty." Vizix blinked. Water. They wanted water. He ran through his mental checklist of typical client requests upon arrival. Most wanted an immediate tour of the facility, pointing out every safety feature, every contingency plan. Others demanded to know about the local fauna, the danger rating of various creatures, the statistical likelihood of injury. Some wanted to review the liability waivers again, despite having signed them weeks prior. A few wanted to immediately test the force field, throwing rocks at them to watch the barrier shimmer and repel. None of them, in his entire career, had asked for water before entering their accommodation.
"Of course,"
he said, recovering his professional demeanor.
"Please wait here just a moment. I'll bring refreshments immediately."
He turned and strode toward Hut 4, aware of their eyes on him. The door sensor recognized his biometric signature, and the panel slid aside in silence. The hut's interior greeted him exactly as he had left it an hour earlier, everything arranged to the highest standards. The cooling unit stood in the corner, pristine. He took a container, filled 4 glasses to the same level, gathered them in one hand, and went back outside. Less than a minute had elapsed. He prided himself on response time. The family was still standing where he had left them, though the juveniles had moved closer to the force field, peering at something beyond it. He approached and extended the glasses toward them.
"Cold water as requested."
The reaction was more enthusiastic than he anticipated. The smaller juveniles both made sounds of delight, the curly-haired one actually dropping to sit cross-legged on the ground, abandoning any pretense of dignified behavior as she accepted the glass and drank deeply. Her sibling followed suit, sitting down beside her, both of them tilting their glasses back and drinking like they had crossed a desert. The adults smiled, the female's expression softening as she watched her children.
"Thank you so much,"
she said, accepting her own glass. "We've been walking longer than planned." The male took the last glass and drank more slowly, but no less gratefully. "Really appreciated," he added between sips. Physics watched them, particularly the juveniles sitting on the ground. There was dust on the ground. Particulates from the local soil mixed with the imported gravel. Their clothing would need cleaning, but they seemed unconcerned, focused entirely on rehydration. Perhaps humans cared less about such things. He filed the observation away. Now seemed the appropriate time. They had what they needed, they were comfortable, and he had his full spiel prepared.
"If I might have your attention just for a moment,"
he said, projecting his voice to carry professional authority without being aggressive.
"I'd like to familiarize you all regarding the facility and the safety measures we have in place to ensure your Death World experience is both thrilling and secure."
He didn't wait for acknowledgement. The words were already flowing, polished from repetition.
"Survival Experiences Unlimited has been providing controlled danger tourism for 12 standard years, and in that time, we have maintained a safety record that exceeds galactic standards by a factor of 3. The technology you see around you represents the cutting edge of force field generation, environmental monitoring, and emergency response systems."
His hand swept toward the shimmering barrier that surrounded the compound.
"These barriers are maintained by redundant generators located in hardened bunkers beneath the facility. Each generator is capable of maintaining the full field independently. The barriers themselves are calibrated to stop any organic matter traveling above a certain velocity, while allowing slower movement and air circulation. This means projectiles, charging predators, or atmospheric phenomena will be repelled, but you can enjoy natural breezes and authentic atmospheric conditions."
He was in his element now, the words coming automatically while part of his mind observed the family's reactions. The male was nodding, his eyes following Vizik's gestures, but there was something in his expression, a quality Vizix couldn't quite identify. Not boredom, exactly. Perhaps patience. The female had pulled out a device and was capturing images of the surroundings, occasionally glancing at Vizix, but not giving him full attention. The juveniles had finished their water and set their glasses aside, and were now occupied studying something small on the ground, their heads close together as they examined it. These were not the reactions he was accustomed to. Usually, clients hung on his every word, particularly the safety portions. They asked questions, demanded demonstrations, wanted reassurance layered upon reassurance. These humans seemed almost casual about being on a Category 6 death world. He continued regardless.
"The rules for your safety are straightforward but critical. First, remain within the designated safe zones at all times, unless accompanied by myself or another certified guide. Second, do not attempt to feed, call to, or otherwise attract the attention of local fauna. Third, maintain your emergency beacon on your person 24 hours per cycle. Fourth, and this is absolutely crucial, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to touch or handle any wildlife you encounter, even within the protected zones."
He turned, extending his arm toward the force field. his fingers pointing toward the area beyond where pink shapes moved in the alien vegetation.
I want to draw your particular attention to those creatures you can see outside the barrier. Those are what we call venomous gliders. The scientific designation is quite long, but locally they're known for the pink coloration of their carapaces and their ability to glide between tall flora you see beyond.
The venomous gliders were quite active today, he noted. At least a dozen were visible, their wings catching sunlight and creating little flashes of rose and salmon. They were roughly the size of his hand, insectoid in basic structure, but with 6 wings arranged in 3 pairs down their backs. Their bodies were segmented, protected by that distinctive pink shell that varied from pale coral to deep magenta, depending on age and diet. When they glided, the wings extended and locked, allowing them to cover impressive distances without energy expenditure. When landing or feeding, the wings folded into intricate patterns against their bodies.
These creatures are extraordinarily common in this biome,
he continued, still facing away from the family, watching the gliders' movements.
However, and please listen carefully to this, their defensive mechanism makes them extremely dangerous to most species. Their skin secretes a compound that causes severe neural reactions on contact. For most beings, touching a venomous glider results in immediate pain, followed by temporary paralysis of the affected limb, followed by systemic effects that can include respiratory distress, cardiac arrhythmia, and in severe cases, complete system shutdown.
He turned slightly, angling to maintain eye contact while still indicating the creatures.
We have encountered clients who, upon seeing these creatures, found them beautiful or intriguing and wished to interact with them. This cannot be permitted. I cannot stress this enough. Under no circumstances, regardless of how harmless they may appear, how docile their behavior, or how curious you might become, are you to touch a venomous glider. The consequences could be fatal.
He let the words hang in the air for a moment, allowing their weight to settle. This was the part where clients usually became very serious, where the reality of the danger penetrated their excitement and reminded them why they had signed extensive waivers. He had delivered this warning 200 times and every single client had responded appropriately. He turned fully around to face the family and provide the traditional reassuring smile that would follow the serious warning. The words died in his throat. The humans were not where he had left them. The female was still inside the barrier, but she had moved closer to the edge, her device raised and aimed outward. The male and both juveniles were outside, beyond the force field, in the unrestricted zone, and they were not alone. The male was crouched on his heels, both hands extended, 3 venomous gliders perched on his arms, one on each forearm and another on his left hand. The pink insects were completely calm, their wings folded, their antennae waving gently as they explored his skin. The curly-haired juvenile knelt beside him, giggling as another glider crawled up her arm toward her shoulder, its delicate legs tickling as they moved. The other juvenile sat cross-legged, holding absolutely still as 2 more gliders investigated her lap, apparently fascinated by the fabric of her clothing. The female looked away from her device, caught Vizik's expression, and smiled. So cute, aren't they? Vizik's mind emptied. Not a single thought occupied the space behind his eyes for a span of heartbeats. Then everything crashed in at once, a cascade of incomprehension and horror. How? He had just explained. He had been thorough. He emphasized the danger, the fatal nature of the toxin, the critical importance of not touching these creatures under any circumstances. The words had left his mouth not 30 seconds ago. How could they already be handling 3 of them? Had his translator malfunctioned? Had they not heard him? Was there some human cultural practice he was unaware of that made them believe warnings didn't apply to them? Were they attempting suicide? His gaze snapped back to the scene beyond the barrier. The male looked utterly relaxed, examining the glider on his hand, even bringing it closer to his face for better observation. The juveniles showed no fear whatsoever, treating the lethal creatures like harmless pets. He thought that any second now, the toxin would hit their systems. Their faces would contort in agony, their bodies would seize, they would collapse, and he would watch an entire family die because they had ignored the most basic safety rule after he had explained it explicitly. He looked at the female, still inside the barrier, still smiling, apparently unconcerned that her male and offspring were seconds from death.
Are you insane?
The words erupted from him, volume and pitch both higher than professional standards permitted.
Did you not hear anything I just said? Do you understand they're going to die?
She blinked, her smile faltering slightly, confusion replacing casual joy. But Vizix was already moving, his professionalism shattering completely. He circled the barrier, heading for the access point, his voice rising to a shout.
Get back inside! Get away from those creatures immediately! Do you have any idea what you've done?
His voice carried across the compound, sharp and panicked. The venomous gliders reacted to the sudden sound, their wings snapping open in alarm. They launched from the humans, gliding away towards safer perches in the vegetation beyond. The male stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. The juveniles scrambled to their feet, their expressions shifting from delight to concern.
Inside now!
Vizix shouted, gesturing frantically at the barrier opening.
We need to get you to medical immediately. How long ago did they touch you? 30 seconds? 40?
The family moved toward the barrier, responding to his urgency even if they didn't understand it. They crossed back into the safe zone, and Vizix immediately began examining them, looking for signs of toxin exposure, discoloration of the skin, tremors in the extremities, respiratory distress, anything. He found nothing. They looked perfectly healthy. The male was watching him, concern in his expression but no pain. The juveniles looked frightened, but by Vizix's reaction, not by any physical distress.
This is unacceptable!
Vizix continued, his control completely gone. He paced, his hands moving in agitated gestures, his voice cracking slightly.
I explained the danger. I was explicitly clear about the lethal nature of those creatures, and you just walked out there and started handling them like they were domestic animals. Do you have any concept of responsibility? Do you care so little for your lives? For your children's lives?
The female had stopped taking pictures. She stood very still, her device lowered, her expression shifting toward alarm.
I'm going to have to summon emergency medical transport,
Vizix said, pulling out his communication device. His fingers shook as he tried to access the emergency protocols menu.
They'll have to bring a full toxin treatment suit. Do you understand what you've put me through? What you've put yourselves through? I'm going to have to file incident reports. There will be investigations, my entire safety record. 12 years without a single client injury, and you've destroyed it in less than 5 minutes because you couldn't follow the most basic instructions.
He finally got the emergency menu open, his finger hovering over the medical emergency button.
And the company won't cover this. Do you understand? The treatment, even if it works, could bankrupt you. And for what? To pet something pretty? I don't get paid enough for this. I don't get paid nearly enough to watch people commit suicide through sheer stupidity.
Vizix, the male said, his voice calm and level. I think there's been a misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding?
Vizix's voice went up another register.
I told you not to touch them. Those were the exact words that left my mouth. Do not touch the venomous gliders. How is that a misunderstanding? How is that remotely ambiguous?
Let me introduce myself properly, the male said, maintaining his calm tone despite Vizix's agitation. My name is Henry. This is my wife Sarah and our daughters Emma and Lily. He gestured to each family member in turn. I think you've mistaken us for someone else. We're not clients of your facility. We're just a family on a camping trip. Vizix's finger froze over the emergency button. We found this place by accident. Henry continued. Our ship is parked about 10 minutes that way. He pointed toward a path that led away from the compound. We've been hiking around the area and the girls got thirsty. When we saw your facility, we thought we'd ask if we could get some water. That's all. We didn't realize you thought we were customers or clients or whatever you call them. The words filtered through Vizix's panic slowly, like liquid through a clogged drain. Not clients, not guests, random people who just happened to be nearby. He had mistaken random campers for his scheduled clients. He had delivered his entire professional orientation to beings who were crazy enough to camp on a death world. His eyes moved past the human family, and his blood turned cold. 3 beings stood near the entrance to the compound. They were Laudarians, unmistakably so. Their skin was green, but not a uniform shade. The adult male's was deep forest, almost dark enough to seem black in shadows, while the female's was lighter, more like a new spring growth. Their child, standing between them, had skin that was paler still, almost lime in tone. And all 3 of them were staring at the scene they had just witnessed. The child's mouth hung open, jaw descended as far as anatomy permitted. The parents' expressions were harder to read, their large eyes making emotional interpretation difficult. But their body language spoke volumes. They stood very close together, the adults positioned protectively near their child. These were his actual clients, and they had arrived in time to watch him deliver his safety briefing to the wrong family, then watch that family immediately violate every safety rule by playing with creatures he had just described as lethal, then witnessed his complete emotional breakdown in response.
I apologize,
Vizix said quietly, finding a fragment of his professional composure. He turned to Henry and his family.
You're correct. There has been a misunderstanding. So I suppose you are a species who are immune to the toxic environment outside.
That's right, Sarah said simply. Vizix nodded, then turned toward the Laudarians. He arranged his features into what he hoped was a welcoming smile.
Welcome! You must be the Grenth family. I apologize for the confusion. If you'll just give me a moment to escort these folks out, I can begin your proper orientation and... We would like to speak to your supervisor,
the male Laudarian said. His voice was thin and reedy, typical of his species.
Immediately, please.
Vizix felt something sink in his chest.
Of course. I understand there was some confusion, but I assure you I can provide you the full safety briefing and... We don't feel safe here,
the female interrupted, her large eyes fixed on Vizix, unblinking.
We would like to speak to whoever is in charge of this facility.
The child continued to stare at the humans, particularly at the male and juveniles who had been handling the gliders. The expression on his young face was pure shock, like he had witnessed something that fundamentally violated his understanding of reality. Vizix opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing he could say that would salvage the situation. He nodded once.
I'll contact my supervisor immediately.
The dual suns had moved significantly across the sky by the time Vizix found himself standing outside his boss's office. Both families had left. The Laudarians had departed after a long conversation via communicator, apparently mollified by whatever assurances and compensations they had been offered. The humans had left quietly once it became clear that they had unwittingly triggered a disaster, Sarah apologizing repeatedly while Henry gathered their daughters and headed back toward their ship. The door sensor chimed, indicating his presence.
Enter,
came the voice from within. The office was designed to impress clients while maintaining a certain aesthetic that suggested adventure without threat. Natural light streamed through a viewport that looked out over the protected compound and the wilderness beyond. The furniture was crafted from imported timber, a blue wood from the Trenazi system that had distinctive grain patterns. The spatial arrangement was calculated. The desk sat on a slightly raised platform, just enough to place anyone sitting behind it above visitors. It was subtle, but Vizix had always found the room vaguely oppressive. His boss sat behind the desk now, leaning back in his chair. Kelrix was older than Vizix by at least 2 decades, evident in the way his red skin had begun to lose some of its vibrancy, the black spots fading slightly at their edges. His ears had the slight droop that came with age, no longer holding perfectly upright, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on Vizix, saying nothing. The silence stretched. Vizix knew his tactic. Kelrix employed it frequently, letting quiet do the work of making subordinates uncomfortable, letting them fill the space with excuses or explanations before he had even asked for them. Vizix remained silent, standing at what he hoped was an appropriately respectful distance from the desk, his posture correct but not rigidly at attention. Finally, after the silence had grown to painful lengths, Kelrick spoke.
Let me check if I got this right.
His voice was measured, each word given equal weight.
Today you are scheduled to receive and orient the Kreth family for their 5-day Death World experience package. Yes, sir. Instead, you provided that complete orientation to a human family who had simply wandered onto the property to ask for water. That's correct, sir. You delivered the full safety briefing, including the specific warnings about venomous gliders to people who neither needed nor requested this information.
Vizix said nothing. The statement required no confirmation.
Then while you were speaking, this human family went outside the barrier and began handling the exact creatures you had just described as lethal. And you, understandably, given the information you possessed, had a complete breakdown in front of the actual clients who had arrived and witnessed the entire event. Yes, sir.
Kelrix leaned forward, his elbows coming to rest on the blue wood surface.
The Kreth family has declined their package and requested a full refund, plus compensation for their distress. They have indicated they will be posting reviews of their experience on multiple travel platforms. They used the phrase unsafe environment several times during our conversation.
Vizix felt the weight of those words settle on him. Reviews mattered in their industry. One bad review could cost dozens of potential bookings.
I take full responsibility, sir. The mistake was entirely mine. I should have confirmed their identity before beginning any protocols. I was too focused on preparation, on being ready, and I forgot the fundamental step of actually verifying who I was speaking to. That is correct,
Kelrick said.
You should have confirmed their identity. That's basic procedure covered in your initial training and reinforced in quarterly reviews. Yes, sir. However,
Kelrix leaned back again, his expression shifting slightly.
I bear some responsibility as well. There was information you should have had that might have prevented this situation.
Vizix looked up surprised.
Tell me something, Vizix. What did you think when you saw humans camping on this planet?
Vizix paused, considering.
Honestly, sir, I didn't think much of it at the time. I was focused on the apparent danger to their lives. But afterward, I did wonder. This is a Category 6 death world. Not many species would choose to camp here recreationally. I assumed perhaps they were researchers or possibly very experienced adventurers, though they seemed casual for their category. They were neither,
Kelrick said.
They were exactly what they claimed. A family on a camping vacation. And that brings me to the information I should have shared with you.
He pulled up something on his data terminal, then turned the screen so Vizix could see.
4 months ago, our revenue projections for the facility were examined by executive leadership. They noted that while we generated acceptable income for our core clientele, we were underutilizing the available space.
The screen showed charts and graphs. Vizix could see occupancy rates, revenue per hectare, various calculations he didn't fully understand.
Someone in the strategic planning department had an idea,
Kelrix continued.
Humans originate from a Class 13 death world. Did you know that? I knew their homeworld was classified as dangerous, but no, I didn't know the specific rating. Class 13. That makes Earth one of the most hostile planets known to harbor sentient life. Humans evolved in an environment that would kill most species within hours. As a result, their biology is remarkably robust. They have redundant systems, aggressive immune responses, and resistance to a wide variety of toxins that would be lethal to others.
Vizix began to understand where this was going.
The strategic planning department realized that humans could safely visit this Category 6 death world without requiring any of our expensive safety infrastructure. No force fields needed, no guides required, no emergency medical equipment on standby. They could simply camp here, like they would on any moderately wild planet. And they would pay for this.
Vizix asked.
Not much,
Calrex admitted.
A small side rental fee, access to basic amenities, and that's it. Nothing compared to what we charge the crets of the galaxy. But here's the beautiful part.
He manipulated the screen, bringing up new numbers.
They require almost no support, no staff oversight needed. They bring their own equipment, manage their own safety, and very rarely request any assistance, which means the profit margin, despite the low price point, is actually higher than our traditional clients.
Vizix stared at the numbers, understanding dawning.
Because there are no costs. Exactly. A Lodarian family paying 40,000 credits for a 5-day experience requires 3 full-time staff members, constant monitoring, maintained force fields consuming significant power, emergency medical capabilities, insurance, liability coverage, and extensive safety infrastructure. A human family paying 400 credits for a week-long camping permit requires a single greeting, maybe directions to facilities if requested, and basically nothing else. They're completely self-sufficient. So the revenue strategy changed.
Vizix said slowly.
4 months ago, yes. We began accepting human camping permits. We've had several families come through since then. 0 incidents, 0 complaints, 0 resource expenditure beyond basic amenities. They come, they camp, they leave, they recommend us to their friends. It's been extraordinarily successful. And you didn't inform the staff.
Calrex's expression shifted toward something that might have been sheepish on a less composed individual.
The information was supposed to be distributed in the last quarterly briefing. I assigned someone to handle that. Apparently, it was not handled. I discovered this when I reviewed your file before this meeting.
Vizix let out a long breath.
So, when I saw the human family, I had no context for understanding what they were doing here. Correct. And they went outside the barrier and handled venomous gliders. You had no context for understanding why they weren't immediately dying. Are humans actually immune to the toxin? They can just touch them and be fine? Entirely immune,
Calrex said with a sigh.
The galaxy is unfair. They can not only touch them, they could even eat them if they were starving. Though most humans would rather keep them as pets rather than snacks, I suppose.
The pieces assembled in Vix's mind, forming a complete picture of the disaster.
So I delivered a dramatic warning about lethal creatures to beings who had no reason to fear them. Then had a breakdown when they ignored that warning, and the Kreth family witnessed all of this and panicked. That's an accurate summary.
They sat in silence for a moment. Vizix could hear the environmental systems humming, the faint sound of wind outside the viewport.
Am I being terminated, sir?
Calrex shook his head.
No, the mistake was yours, but the failure was partly mine. You should have confirmed their identity. I should have ensured you were informed about the humans. We both failed, and I have no interest in losing competent staff over a mistake that was at least partly systemic.
Relief flooded through Vizix's body.
Thank you, sir. However, you will be completing remedial training on verification protocols, and you will be reading all updates about our current business operations, including the human camping program. Understood? Completely, sir.
Calrex turned his screen back around. A apparently satisfied the conversation was complete.
Dismissed.
Vizix turned to leave, then paused at the door.
Sir, one more question.
Yes?
How many humans are currently camping on the property?
Calrix checked his screen.
400 families at the moment. We have the capacity for 1,000 simultaneously. And they just wander around, outside all barriers. That's correct. They treat this Category 6 dead world the way most species would treat a garden world. It's quite remarkable, actually. I watched one family yesterday hiking near the ridge. The parents were carrying their juvenile in some kind of back-mounted apparatus. They encountered a pack of serrated hunters, those canine-like predators that hunt in groups. Do you know what happened?
They fled?
The serrated hunters fled. Apparently humans put off some kind of aura or predator marker that identifies them as apex threats. The local fauna has learned to avoid them.
Calrix smiled slightly, the first hint of amusement Vizix had seen.
We're actually safer with humans on the property. The dangerous creatures give them a wide berth, which means they stay away from our facilities as well.
Vizix absorbed this information, his entire understanding of the situation recalibrating.
That's insane.
It is. Calrix agreed. Vizix left the office, stepping back into the corridor. Through a distant window, he could see the compound, the force fields still shimmering around the designated client areas. Beyond them, in the unrestricted zones, he thought he could see movement. Probably another human family hiking through the terrain that would hospitalize most species. Completely unbothered by the dangers that gave this place its Category 6 rating. He had learned something today. Beyond the obvious lesson about confirming identities, he had learned that the galaxy was larger and stranger than his training had prepared him for. That beings existed who could pet venomous creatures like harmless animals, who could walk through Death World terrain like it was a recreational park, who could make apex predators flee by simple presence. And apparently, they would pay for the privilege of camping in places that would kill everyone else. Vizix shook his head and headed back toward his quarters. Tomorrow, he would review all the materials about the human program. Tonight, he just wanted to sleep and tried to forget the sight of those juveniles giggling while lethal insects crawled on their arms. Some images, he suspected, would take a long time to fade.